Recently, I saved just under $3,000 when I converted around $150,000 from Canadian to US currency. If you're looking for an efficient way to convert money between these two currencies, I hope some of the ideas in this video will be able to save you some money. Without further ado, let's get started. Hey, my name's Sean. I'm a Canadian that's currently living and working in Seattle. When my family and I moved from Toronto to Seattle, one of the questions that I had to figure out was how to convert a large amount of Canadian currency to US currency, because we're looking to purchase a brand new house in the States. Through some online research and also some advice from a colleague, I was able to save just under $3,000 in this process. In this video, I'll be comparing the pros and cons of 3 different methods which I've used, so hopefully that will provide you some foreign exchange ideas which you can use for your specific situation. The 3 methods are using a standard bank, going through a foreign exchange company like Interchange Financial, or using a method called Norbert's Gambit. Towards the end, I'll be sharing my thought process about which foreign exchange I would choose for a given situation. Before we dive into the first method, I just want to quickly highlight 2 things. All 3 methods work for converting from Canadian to US currency and vice versa. To keep it simple and make it easier to follow along, I'll be focusing on my situation where I was converting from Canadian to US currency. The second thing I want to mention is that all foreign exchange examples in this video will be based on the foreign exchange rate on May 18, 2021. The Canadian to US dollar exchange rate during this period was $1 Canadian was worth around 0.829 US dollars. The first method is going through a standard bank, either in person or via online banking. Most people know this, so I'll keep it brief. Logging into my online bank for $50,000, I get back roughly $40,650 US dollars. Comparing the exchange rate, that's roughly a 2.34 foreign exchange fee. The advantage of using a standard bank is that it's very simple to use, and also you get access to your money immediately, assuming that both your US and Canadian dollar account is within the same bank. One thing I want to quickly call out is that you might be doing a foreign exchange without you knowing. A common instance of this is when you're trying to buy US stock using Canadian brokerage account. During the transaction, the bank will first convert your Canadian dollars to US dollars, and then using the US fund, it would then make a purchase of the US stocks. So effectively, the bank is taking a 2 to 3% cut of your money for every single trade. With that said, let's jump to our second method. The second method is to use a foreign exchange company. I personally use a company called Interchange Financial because I have had some good experience with it. For 50,000 Canadian dollars, you can get roughly 41,288 US dollars. How these foreign exchange companies usually works is you go on their website and you create an account. After that, you link this account to both your Canadian and US account, and after that you're ready to make a transaction. The transaction time usually takes around 3 to 5 business days, but for Interchange Financial, if you call their customer service, they're usually able to reduce this period by 1 to 2 days. One tip I want to share with you guys is that during the initial account setup, I will always verify my account setup by doing a small transaction. The last thing I want to worry about is the money going to the wrong person. For Interchange Financial, they explicitly call it that they would not be able to undo a transaction. This policy might vary between company to company. But again, this type of situation can be easily mitigated by just doing a small transaction. Full disclosure here, I have no affiliation with Interchange Financial. I just happen to have a positive experience with it, and that's why I'm just sharing that with you. I would really encourage you to go online and search for different foreign exchange company and see which company will give you the best rate. Now, let's jump to our final method. The final method that I personally use is a strategy called Norbert's Gambit. This strategy from a high level has 4 components. The first component is that we need to find an ETF which has both representation in both US and Canadian currency. The Horizon US Dollar Currency ETF is an investment vehicle that aims to track the exchange rate between US to Canadian dollars. If the US dollar's worth increases relative to Canadian dollars, the value of the DLR would go up. To illustrate this graph shows that DLR is mapped very closely to the US to Canadian exchange rate. DLR's key Norbert's property is that 1 share of DLR, which is in Canadian currency, is equivalent to 1 share of DLR.U, which is in the US currency. The second component of Norbert's Gambit is a 3-step transaction process. To illustrate this, I'm going to walk through a step-by-step example of how this works. First, you deposit $50,000 into your Canadian brokerage account. Next, you reach out to your brokerage via phone or online chat and ask them to take your 50,000 Canadian dollars and buy DLR shares. You should end up with roughly 4,111 shares. You then immediately tell the brokerage to journal over these DLR shares from your Canadian currency account to DLR.U shares in your US currency brokerage account. Know that this is only possible because one share of DLR, which is in Canadian currency, is equivalent to one share of DLR.U, which is in US currency. Most brokerages do not charge any fees on this journal over process, but double check with your brokerage before proceeding. In 2 to 3 business days, roughly 4,111 DLR.U shares will show up in your US brokerage account. Assuming the Canadian and US exchange rate did not change, when you sell all your shares, you'll end up with roughly $41,406 in US currency. The third component of Norbert's Gambit is the transaction costs. The transaction costs will vary from company to company. Some company even offers no transaction costs. From experience, I find that it usually takes around $10 to buy or sell a stock or ETFs. So roughly speaking, the transaction cost would be roughly $20 for Norbert's Gambit. The final component of Norbert's Gambit is the risk associated with it. Earlier, I mentioned that I assumed that the US to Canadian exchange rate remains the same, which means that the DLR share price also remains the same. When the shares are being journaled from one account to another, we know the share price of DLR is changing. So if the price of DLR went up, you actually make some money, but if it goes down, you actually lose a little bit of money. That's effectively the gamble that you're taking by using this strategy. So what you're really hoping for is that the share price of DLR remains the same or goes up in value during this process. To summarize, using Norbert's Gambit with 50,000 Canadian dollars, you get back roughly 41,386 US dollars, plus and minus the risk that I just talked about. The volatility is actually minimized by taxes. So for example, if you made some money using this method, you have to pay capital gain tax on that. But if you lost some money, you can actually save some tax by offsetting that against some investment capital gains for other investments. I'm personally comfortable with the risk just because the US and Canadian exchange rates are relatively stable. But this strategy is not for everyone. It really depends on your risk tolerance. But do be aware of high volatile market situations such as the 2008 financial crisis or more recently the 2020 COVID market crash. Let's summarize all three methods. Standard banks are simple, provides quick access, but charges the highest foreign exchange fee. Foreign exchange companies charges a very small amount of fees, requires a little bit of initial account setup, and requires 3 to 5 business transaction days. Norbert's Gambit provides the best rates, takes about 3 to 5 days, but requires the most work. My thought process on picking which foreign exchange method to use is actually really simple. I will simply calculate the money that I would save by using Norbert's Gambit versus using a foreign exchange company. If that amount is big enough, I would use Norbert's Gambit. Otherwise, I would just keep it simple and use the foreign exchange company like Interchange Financial. Only in really rare situations where I need the money right away, I would then go with a standard bank. If you've reached the end of this video, I first want to thank you so much for watching my first ever video. I hope you found this information helpful, but if you have any question, feel free to leave your comment below. I promise you I'll try my best to answer your question. Once again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day.